Determine what you want. Okay, where am I at? That is A. Where do I want to be? That is Z. Now I got to fill in all the letters in between, and I need to schedule that on what is most important. So we've got big rocks and small rocks. What can I do right now that's going to give me the biggest return on my investment? Okay, is that rock too big to get done right now? If it is, move to a smaller rock and eliminate those rocks. A lot of it's like debt management. If you find yourself into $100,000 worth of debt, how do you get out? Well, I have to pay all of the bare minimums, and I have to focus as much money as I can into getting something out of the way. Once I get that out of the way, I can take all that money and go to the next rock and the next rock. The same thing can be done with your lifestyle, exercise, and your nutrition. But the whole point, I mean, the first thing you have to do is have the discipline to sit down and write it out and determine what it is you want. And more importantly, too, is why do you want this and how is it going to benefit you? And are you motivated enough to go where you want to go? Or maybe we drop our expectations of what we feel about ourselves and we wait until we get to that level and then we raise the expectation more.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the Live Train Perform podcast. I'm your host, Sean Kober, and joining me today is an absolute heavyweight in the fitness industry, Luke Leaman. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Man, I'm really excited to talk to you today because whether you know it or not, you've actually helped shape my coaching philosophy and my training philosophy after I did your Muscle Nerds Foundations course a couple of years ago. And I'm really excited to, discuss all of the tools and kind of pathways that you've taken to become the person you are, become the trainer that you are today. So just for my listeners, can you give them a little bit of a background story to who you are, how long you've been in the industry, how you got into the industry and what you're doing now?
Yeah, man, I mean, we got to go way back, right? So I started training when I was about 8 years old. So growing up in Texas, we start, especially when we're in the country, like I'm out in the middle of nowhere. My hometown it's a bunch of what you would expect on a movie, a bunch of redneck hicks, cowboys. We all did the, roping and riding and building fence and all that shit. And we played football. So you didn't have a lot to do there. It was either like fighting or fucking or football. That's the 3 F's of Texas. And so I started out, not really having access to a lot of information because this is obviously this is back in the 80s. We didn't have the internet back then. And so it's just like finding books and magazines and things. And then I was very lucky that when I went into school, most of our coaches were ex-collegiate football players, ex-powerlifters, ex-bodybuilders. So they taught us how to do things right, which you normally don't see in America at the high school level or at the junior high level. Most of them is that they're ugly cleans. You can see any of these fail videos where guys are doing really horrible power cleans and squats and terrible stuff. But, did that, power lifted through high school. And during this time, so we got the internet when I was about 14. And in the magazines, I'd seen Charles Poliquin, Paul Chek, Charles Staley, all these like heavyweight guys, like the legends that we all look at now. And Charles really resonated with me the most because the stuff made sense. He took all the systems that everybody had done. He was a fan of physical culture, and so as I am as well, physical culture history. So when I did his stuff, I was like, man, this shit works. This works for me, and it got me big, and it got me strong, and it helped me through football. And when I left for college, I kind of got out of powerlifting, went into bodybuilding for a while, then went back into powerlifting, then went into bodybuilding, then went to strongman, then went back into bodybuilding, and just kind of got tired of all of that stuff. And at some point, around 2007, I saved up enough money. I'd never really left Texas on my own ever, right? And so I'm like 27, and I hop on a plane and I fly to Chicago to meet Charles Poliquin and to do his course, and I was instantly hooked. I loved the culture. I loved what he was saying. I loved everything about it. So then I did my level 2, I did biosig, I did a lot of special consideration courses like how to train SWAT team, how to train MMA, how to train corporate executives. And then at one point he asked me if I would come on and be an assistant. And so for a long time, I did a lot of the biosig courses throughout North America. So in Canada and America. Then eventually, when he was leaving the company, I took over his duties there as far as teaching. So I was one of the head lecturers for BioSig. I was a head lecturer for the PICP program, developing courses, doing research and development, giving the courses and that type of thing. And then in about 2015, I was just kind of fed up with the company. When you work part-time for a company and you're not there all the time and you don't see all the things that happen at the corporate office, you have a different viewpoint when you're balls deep into it, and then you see how everything really is, and you kind of pull back the curtain. It didn't really align with my ethics or morals, and so at one point it was like, okay, we need to part ways, and that's when I started Muscle Nerds, and then it just fucking took off.
I really enjoyed the Muscle Nerds Foundations course. I think it was about 2 years ago that I met you in Singapore. And that really had an impact on my knowledge and understanding of the autonomic nervous system and, getting into basic health markers and things like that. And I've got about 80 episodes of this podcast out now. The first episode is all about the introduction, who I am, why I've put out a podcast, my background, knowledge, experience, et cetera, et cetera. But then the second episode is all about those basic health markers. And that's one of the biggest things that I took away from your Muscle Nerds course, man. And that's kind of led me down that path of, understanding stress management and, the importance of sleep and hydration, nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to dive into that in a moment because I want you to kind of touch on all of the different elements that make up health and performance. Before I go into that, though, which kind of segues into that question, is I'm an ambassador for Swiss 8, which is a proactive mental health program designed to allow people to structure in and schedule 8 important pillars of health and wellness to allow themselves to be better at life. And those pillars are sleep, nutrition, discipline, time management, fitness, personal growth, mindfulness, and minimalism. For you, are one of those pillars more important than any others? And if so, why? And have they changed throughout the years of your life?
You're so close to your mic. I feel like we have the same mic. I feel like I should be like talking into it like this. Looks good. That was just kind of me stalling in order to figure out what I was going to say. Here's the thing. Like for me, they're all equally as important. I look at everything that I look at that has multiple qualities. I try to look at it as a radar graph. And I say, okay, in the middle, I have my goal. And I have all of these elements on the outside. And I need to be focusing on all of them. But sometimes we need to focus on more than others because we have to bring those points to the middle so they all align. But I think the one point out of all of those that's probably the most important is the discipline one. Because it's good to say we need more sleep, we need to eat right, we need to exercise, we need the lifestyle stuff. But if you don't create the habits and take those habits, turn them into rituals, and you don't have the discipline to do it, then when things get tough, you're going to fall apart. So you have to create some type of structured discipline thing. You basically have to treat it like the military. You get up at a certain time, you go to bed at a certain time. You get up and you make your bed. You get up and you make your bed and you take a shit. You get up to make your bed, take a shit, and you brush your teeth. And then you have breakfast. That's probably the one thing that most people are missing. And the reason they can't get to their goals is they have something, they like the idea of getting fit. They like the idea of getting dick skin lean. They like the idea of being able to run a really fast 5K and have a heavy squat, but they don't put together a plan. And if they do put together a plan, they don't act on it. And that's the difference between people who actually get there and people who don't.
I love that answer, man. Your voice is obviously a lot louder than mine, and you boom a little bit more, so you've got a little bit more space on the mic there. You're good, bro. Mate, great answer. For people listening that are like, all right, cool, he makes a really good point. I need to create a little bit more discipline in my life. What's some recommendations that you can give to them? Actionable takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing you have to do is you got to put shit on paper. If you don't have a plan and you don't schedule things and have a diary, it's not going to happen because things are going to pop up that's going to throw things out of whack, and you need to be able to get back into a certain rhythm. So building some type of rhythm structure where, like I said, you get up, go to bed at the same time, you have lunch at the same time. Even if you have to put, a lot of people, they'll skip meals, they'll try to make up the meals, they'll skip exercise. My God, we've all got smartphones. Just put, if you have to put 15 different alarms on your phone to make sure you drink water and eat enough food, do that. It's all about time management. If you don't have time management, you are going to get stuck when a spanner gets thrown into the wheel. So determine what you want. Okay, where am I at? That is A. Where do I want to be? That is Z. Now I got to fill in all the letters in between, and I need to schedule that on what is most important. So we've got big rocks and small rocks. What can I do right now that's going to give me the biggest return on my investment? Okay, is that rock too big to get done right now? If it is, move to a smaller rock and eliminate those rocks. A lot of it's like debt management. If you find yourself into $100,000 worth of debt, how do you get out? Well, I have to pay all of the bare minimums, and I have to focus as much money as I can into getting something out of the way. Once I get that out of the way, I can take all that money and go to the next rock and the next rock. The same thing can be done with your lifestyle, exercise, and your nutrition. But the whole point, I mean, the first thing you have to do is have the discipline to sit down and write it out and determine what it is you want. And more importantly, too, is why do you want this and how is it going to benefit you? And are you motivated enough to go where you want to go? Or maybe we drop our expectations of what we feel about ourselves and we wait until we get to that level and then we raise the expectation more. Because a lot of people, they come to train with us and they're like, okay, what do you want? I want to look like this, Instagram person. And I'm like, okay, you're 38% body fat. You don't have the same structure. You definitely don't have the same discipline. How fast do you want this? I think this can be done in 12 weeks. Honey, this is going to take you a few years. Like, that person eats, sleeps, poops, and does drugs. Like, are you willing to do that? No. Okay, now we got to take it one thing at a time and make that plan and make sure you start, how do I help you do the plan without it being too inconvenient, right?
Yeah, mate, another great answer. And people that have been listening to the podcast for a long time will just be like, okay, I understand where Cobes' coaching philosophies come from, man. Because I basically say the same thing, mate. And it's like, you always say prep the prep. That's a big one that I took away from you is like prep the prep. You've got to get people to the fucking starting line first. And that means you need to manage people's health. That means that they need to be sleeping right. That means they need to be, managing all these other physiological processes and having the body at homeostasis before we can then start pushing them. And something you talk about is least mode, beast mode. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. So this kind of came up as a joke between me and one of my best mates. And what happened was he was sending me Instagram trainers or Instagram models or whatever that were showing like their hashtag beast mode workouts. And we're looking at the workouts going, that's what you're calling beast mode? Really? You're just doing crazy shit and it's not even hard. And then my friend goes, it's more like hashtag least mode. And I went, that's pretty good. So I wrote that down. And then when we started Muscle Nerds and we started thinking about, why do a lot of people fail at getting where they want to be? Well, they're doing too much too soon when they don't have the physiology to actually do that long term. So we need to create, you look at like yin and yang, we need to create a yin for the yang. So the beast mode is the yang and the least mode is the yin. If you constantly have too much yang, you burn the oil out. Yang is fire. If I need to replace the oil, I need the yin. So sometimes we need to think, well, this training and dieting or training in a surplus may not be the answer. The answer might be more recovery, more cardiovascular conditioning, get in shape, get mobile, get flexible, get out of pain, get your structure back into balance. Then when you're feeling good and you've got your homeostasis and that is lifted to a point where now you can actually begin beating yourself into the ground, right? And that's the whole point is if you want to make a big jump in fitness or a big jump in strength or a big jump in size or a big drop in fat, you have to push the body into a state of overreaching. So if you're already overreached and then you jump into the training, you don't have any platform to recover from. So it's better to get your recovery up, get your parasympathetic system up, get it level with the sympathetic system, then purposely crush one and raise the other until you start getting symptomatic that the shit's hitting the fan. And then you go back to the least mode stuff, right? But I think something I just thought about, a lot of people, if you were going to go run, you're going to go run a marathon, right? You would get in the car and you would drive to the place where you started. You wouldn't run to the place where you're starting the marathon. That would be stupid. But that's what people do. They sprint to go to the marathon. That makes absolutely no sense.
Mate, I fucking love that analogy. I'm gonna steal that and credit you, of course. But we're gonna dive into the autonomic nervous system in a little bit more detail in a moment, man, because that's brilliant. I talk about that a lot. And again, I think that came back down to being educated from you and realizing that you can't just fucking smash yourself into the ground and expect results. You need to, balance that autonomic nervous system, which we'll dive into in a moment. But what we've just spoken about, is that kind of what led you down the path of starting Muscle Nerds and has created the philosophy behind what's driving Muscle Nerds?
Yeah, partly. I think part of it was when I was learning from Charles and when I was teaching at Pelican Group. I realized that we were teaching personal trainers how to train Olympic level athletes. So the protocols we used, the dieting, the supplementation, the lifting, all that stuff had to do with, I need to take somebody from year 0 to year 4 to get ready for the Olympics or Worlds or some type of national event. And so I started asking people, how many athletes do you actually train, like high level athletes? And no one would raise their hand. I might get 1 or 2 people, and they may train. One guy may, in the class of 60, may train all athletes. One other dude trains 2 athletes. He thinks he's an athletic trainer. Like, you're not. You're your personal trainer. You just happen to have a couple of athletes. And so I realized after using it with the general population, okay, these are all great methods, but using them in a Gold's Gym with Mary Muffintop and Joe Dingleberry, it's not the right thing for them. Like, if you're dealing with the people who have disposable income, which are 35 and up, career professionals, a lot of this stuff is way too hard and way too intense, and it needs to be modified and dialed back. If your demographic is athletes or you're training 21-year-olds, you can do this stuff. But I found it wasn't as effective without modification, heavy modification. And so when I left Pelican Group, I said to my wife, we were dead broke. We didn't have a fucking pot to piss in. I met her in Sydney, and 2.5 months later, she flew to America, quit both of her jobs, sold her car, flew to America. We went around America for 3 months, and now I don't have a job. And I'm like, okay, do we go to Texas or do we go to Australia? Do we go to New Zealand? And we're like, well, we'll go to Australia and New Zealand because I have an apartment there. We can stay there. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I said, well, what are we going to do? Like, I know education, I know training. I don't have any other fucking skills. So we said, well, let's start an education company and let's do it real. Let's not make a supplement company, hint, hint, that's masquerading as an education company. Let's make an actual education company with no financial ties to any supplement company, any gym equipment. We just sell education and tell people how to do things right. And I said, okay, well, we've got to find a hole to fill in the industry. And, I kind of go on the premise that if you want to be successful, you need to solve a problem that people have that no one else is solving right now. And I said, well, no one's teaching how to train normal people. If you do your certifications, it's a strength and conditioning certification, or it's a sports medicine certification, or it's whatever. No one's just being realistic about training normal people, your normal next door neighbors, the people who need it the most. Super overweight, super out of shape, whatever. So we're gonna specialize in training general population and teaching coaches how to do this correctly. So when I announced that I left Pelican Group, we had hundreds of people texted me and said, hey, can you do a workshop here, workshop there? Can I train with you? I always wanted to work with you, but I didn't want to work with Pelican Group. And I went, yeah, that's cool. And so we actually paid our way back to Australia by a guy in Kuwait said, hey, can you come out and train my 30 trainers? Yes. A guy in Dubai said, hey, on your way to Kuwait, can you stop by and do a seminar? Yes. That's how we actually got back to Australia. And then we did a seminar there, a seminar in New Zealand. And then it was just one after another, and then it just got out of control really fast. But yeah, so that's the Reader's Digest version. Yeah, I saw where I had failed as a coach and where other people failed and where I can help them not make those mistakes and actually get them better results in a safe and healthy manner.
I love that story, mate. And I think that's testament to, speaks volumes about why you're where you're at right now and how successful Muscle Nerds has been. Because a lot of people, and I was the same when I first started, did my first certifications, was I want to train athletes. And most trainers are like, I want to train professional athletes. And, 1% of people actually make it there where they're training professional athletes. But, going through that journey, you have a lot of general population clients that you're dealing with. And every single person that walks into the gym is a jigsaw puzzle. Everyone's got different stresses. Everyone's got different lifestyles. Everyone's got different traumas that they're carrying from fucking childhood and shit like that. So, every single person's is a jigsaw puzzle, and your methodology has, really opened my eyes to. I was kind of already doing some of that stuff, but without kind of knowing the mechanisms behind it. Just by looking at how people moved and how they walked into the gym, what their body language was like, how they were speaking, et cetera, et cetera. Because I did my NLP courses and things like that when I was younger. But yeah, your course really put a lot of that stuff together for me. And I think it's a really powerful tool for trainers. And, it's one of those courses that I would recommend to really new trainers that are getting into the space to manage people's fucking health first before they then start putting the foot on the accelerator and trying to get them, to their end state, because a healthy organism is an adaptable organism, and we need to be in a healthy position first before we can then start going into beast mode, like you say. Can you give your explanation of the autonomic nervous system for people listening at home? Because I've spoken about it numerous times on the podcast. They're probably sick of hearing me speak about it. I'd like to hear your take on it and how you would explain that to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to come kind of on the back end of what you just said, when I wrote the foundations course, I said, okay, I'm going to write the course that I wish I had 20 years ago when I started training people. So what would have been the most valuable thing? And how do we say, okay, as a trainer, you shouldn't be like, I know some trainers want to read labs and biochemistry panels and all this stuff. It's not your job, and most of us don't have the training for it. How do I find, okay, let's have a symptom profile, and let's take those symptoms and let's match them up with objective data to form a blueprint and fit those jigsaw pieces together so that we can make the right protocol that's going to work for that person in that at that moment, at that time. And then how do I progress them through proper periodization to improve their health and then improve their performance? Now, when we look at the autonomic nervous system, there's the two main branches that people think about. And just to define the autonomic nervous system, this is basically all the stuff that keeps you alive that's pretty much automated. Now, we do have some control over this. Training and nutrition can control. We have supplementation that can control these things, breathing techniques, more sleep, less sleep. This can move things in positive and negative manners. But if you didn't have the autonomic nervous system, you wouldn't remember. You'd have to constantly remember to breathe, right? And there's things that control stress response, relaxation response, and all that. So when you look at the traditional two branches, you've got sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, we are designed to be mainly in the parasympathetic pathway the majority of the time. The way I look at a lot of stuff, and a lot of people give me flack about this, but I look at things from an evolutionary perspective. Okay, if you took our environment away and put us back in loincloths with spears, the only reason you would have a sympathetic system is in case a lion jumped out at you and you had to either run or you had to fight. That's realistically all it is. So those pathways aren't really different than they were, say, 10,000 years ago. What's different is our environment. And so the environment is causing this sympathetic system, which is a very acute system. It's supposed to go up and then immediately go down. Now it's revved up all the time. So it would be like getting in your car, slamming in the first gear, and then trying to go, 120K on the motorway. Your engine would go, ram, boof. But that's exactly what people are doing with their own physiology, right? So what we need to do is make sure that we have a good parasympathetic reserve, and we're most of the time in that pathway. It's better for everything. It's better for fat burning. It's better for relaxation. It's better for long-term health. But we need to be able to flip that switch, and we still need to stimulate the sympathetic drive at some point. So that's what training is supposed to be. But if you're massively sympathetic all the time and you go and train and drive that harder, you're just making it worse when you try to go back to rest, and you never actually really recover properly. It's going to impair your sleep. It's going to impair your hormones. It's going to impair your gut. It's going to impair your brain, your immune system, everything. It just makes everything crash. And there's a third part of that sometimes you'll see associated with that, sometimes not, which is the enteric system, which the enteric nervous system is your gut. So used to, when I was at Polican Group, the solution for a gut issue was an elimination diet and then throw 500 fucking pills and potions at it. I quickly found out after I left that, you know what, the easiest way, I still believe in elimination diets. I never run any allergy testing, food intolerance panels, or any of that. I just do an elimination test. We remove things that are bothering your gut. We replace it with something else for 6 to 8 weeks. Then we add back stuff slowly. But And that works really well to calm things down. But the main thing is we have to get control of the brain's response to things. So the more hyped up you are and the more sympathetic you are, the more likely you are to have gut issues, bloating, diarrhea, belching, gas that peels the paint off the wall, all that stuff, pain in your stomach. If you can get everything calmed down, most of your gut issues will just disappear. But that's not what people want to hear. It's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't work 80 hours a week. Hey, maybe you should sleep more than 4 hours a night. Maybe you shouldn't go to the gym twice a day for 2 hours. Maybe you should not eat 1,200 calories. Maybe try 2,400 calories. Maybe you should take a multivitamin. That stuff's too hard. It's a lot easier for somebody to go to Australian Sports Nutrition and ask some 18-year-old about a gut, and they hand you some box of bullshit that just makes you shit and piss yourself all day, and it doesn't work, right? It's absolutely free to heal most gut problems by getting your brain and your autonomic nervous system balanced. Right? Now, last thing I'll say on this, don't think about this as a teeter-totter, because it's not. Think about it as two elevators, and they can go up or they can go down. So if your parasympathetic system is down here and your sympathetic drive is up here, what we need to do is remove things that keep the sympathetic system up. So maybe reduce your training a little bit or change your training focus from neural to maybe more metabolic stuff. Don't do HIIT training, do more aerobic style stuff. Only go to lowest effective dose and prioritize sleep and having a hobby and spending time with your family and whatever else that makes you happy in life and gives you self-fulfillment. Journaling, reflecting, long moonlit walks at the beach, whatever floats your boat. If you start removing the stuff that is causing the sympathetic drive, it will lower. But the missing piece is you have to actively work on parasympathetic system. As sympathetic system go down, parasympathetic system can still stay suppressed. You have to work on sleep, passion, eudanism, family, friends, social life. You still have to work on that. So you have to train the parasympathetic side just as diligently as you train the sympathetic side, or you're kind of wasting your time.
I love that, man. That's an excellent explanation. Now, for people listening, the sympathetic state, the fight or flight state, is essential for short-term survival, and the parasympathetic state, rest and digest, is essential for long-term survival. And as Luke said, it's your body's constantly trying to get back to homeostasis and balance everything out so that everything is running optimally. And as Luke said, there are different stress responses, and low level stress in your everyday life adds up to chronic stress. So how I like to explain this to my clients is I will take a sheet of paper and I'll draw a line down the middle. Left column, right column. Left column is going to be the sympathetic state. Right column is going to be the parasympathetic state. And I add up all the things on the left side that create stress, and that might be a poor night's sleep. It might be poor nutrition, less than optimal hydration levels, might be problems with my relationship, might be career issues, or, anxiety around what I'm doing with my life and where I'm going, and financial problems, and, the kids are being little shits or whatever. And they might all be like level 1, 2, 3s. Okay. But all of those things add up. And if they're not dealt with, then over time, that's going to become chronic stress. And then, your sympathetic state is going to be jacked up. Your parasympathetic state is going to be well suppressed. And there's going to be a massive imbalance there, which is then going to lead to illness and disease and inflammation and all that type of stuff. Now, on the right column, I look at all the things that, relax you. And most people don't have any tools on the right-hand column. So it might be a massage. It might be training. Okay, it might be yoga, it might be some mindfulness and meditation, whatever. Okay, the point that I want to make here is that those tools are going to impact people in a different way. So, for example, I love taking my motorbike for a ride and listening to a podcast in Thailand. And, I get into a little bit of a flow state and, I kind of relax. For me, it's therapeutic. It drives the parasympathetic nervous system. But some people, they get on a fucking bike in Thailand and they freak out, and that's going to upregulate the sympathetic nervous system. And if they've already had a stressful day, going to the gym and hammering yourself most people go, oh, that's stress relief. Okay. But all you're doing is adding stress on top of stress. If you've had a stressful day, you've woken up late, you haven't had a good breakfast, you're catching every red light on the way to work, you're stuck behind some fucking asshole who's going slow in the fast lane, your boss is looking over your shoulder, etc., etc. Like, the last thing you need to do when you go to the gym that day is fucking hammer yourself. Still go to the gym. It's part of your schedule. It's part of your routine, but focus more on the mobility side of things. Focus more on, some aerobic work, some low level aerobic work where you're focusing on, you might be listening to some chill out music, or you're listening to, a podcast or something like that. Is there anything you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah. And here's the thing too, like, let's say this is your situation and everything's going wrong in your life and you feel like, look, lifting some heavy ass weights makes me feel better. You can still do that, but you want to limit the exposure. So if you have 60 minutes to work out, instead of bashing yourself on the ground for 60 minutes, compartmentalize that and maybe look at doing like a more of a concurrent routine. So it's like, okay, for the first 15 minutes, I'm going to work up to a 12 rep max, or I'm going to work up to a 5 rep max. Now I've appeased that monster inside of me that needs to feel heavy weight on my back in a squat. Then the next section you might do, okay, I'm going to do 25 minutes of aerobic stuff. So I might do 2-minute rowing. I might do 2-minute on the echo bike. I might be 2 minutes on the ski erg, and do more of an aerobic protocol that's significantly hard and gasses you out, but at least it's pushing the aerobic system and the parasympathetic system instead. And then now that you're nice and warmed up, spend the last, say, 20 minutes or so working on flexibility and mobility. There is a high association with static stretching and calming the nervous system down. You can also find research talking about how it builds GABA in the brain and calms down some of the more excitatory neurotransmitters. And then, let's face it, most people are about as mobile as concrete. So if you find that stretching hurts, you probably need to do a little bit more of that. So think about weighted mobility work, static stretching. Give yourself a goal to start learning how to work into the splits. Anything you can do to increase joint mobility and reduce pain is going to lower sympathetic drive, because the pain is going to kick that up. And a lot of people train through pain, which I've learned over, 35 years of lifting, that you don't want to do that. And if there's some type of pain and dysfunction, if you just keep loading that, it's not going to get any better. You might as well go ahead and work on eliminating that, and then going back to loading later. That way you make sure you don't end up injuring yourself, and now you can't lift at all. Last year, I hurt my back massively. It was something that I was avoiding. It was a niggle, I told myself. And then one day it just went, and I was side flexed and rotated, and I couldn't stand up. And within a few hours, I couldn't even crawl. I tried to get out of my bed to crawl to the bathroom because I refused to piss in a bucket. And I got off the bed and I got about half a meter. And Zoe my wife goes, "You're not going to make it to the bathroom." And I'm looking, I've got another 2 meters to go. I go, "Nah." So I just kind of went beep, beep, and just kind of backed up. And it took me about 20 minutes to get back in bed. And I was like, "Okay, bring me the bucket." And I just pissed in the bucket all night. And I had to fix that, and I wanted to go back to squatting, but every time I put a bar on my back, that fear hit, sympathetic drive went up, and I went, "No, I'm not ready. I'm not ready." And it's just been this week. I've been away from jiu-jitsu for almost 2 years now because of business and also getting hurt. And I've gone now 2 days of jiu-jitsu, and my back is 110%. It couldn't be any better. But you get a lot of guys, especially you see it a lot in fighting, they get injured, they keep fighting. And then they end up with, "Oh, my knee hurts." Now 3 months later, they've got a meniscal tear, or they've got an ACL injury, or now their back is all fucked up and they have to have surgery. If you just stop what's doing that and work on the rehab, you could be back. You could be back doing what you want to do in 3 months and avoid having to have surgery. And now you're out for maybe even a year trying to rehab it.
Mate, another really fucking good point, and something I've touched on numerous times in the podcast as well, is one of the first things I do when I get a new client is I'll go through a movement screen, and I'll literally just get them take their shoes off, take their shirt off, minimize their clothing, and I'll just get them to stand there. I'll do a postural assessment, and then I'll get them to walk down the gym up and back, and then I'll get them to jog, and then I'll gradually increase the pace. And if I'm seeing dysfunction at that fucking low of an intensity where they're just standing there and then they're walking, that's going to shine us. We're going to shine a spotlight on that as we start increasing that load. We start bumping up the intensity. We start bumping up the volume, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a great point. And that kind of ties into, again, what you said before with that kind of modular system where you do some heavy lifting, you do some aerobic work, you do some flexibility, mobility. And this is something that I say all the time is like, start your session with that mobility and flexibility work. Get your body moving correctly. Put the joints in the correct alignment before you start loading it. Get the stabilizers firing up, then get the prime movers fired up, then go and lift heavy, do your strength work, your speed work, your power work, or whatever, and then finish off with some aerobic work. And I love that kind of modular training system where we're touching on a number of different aspects of quality movement. I mean, I could say strength and conditioning, but fuck, man, it's quality movement. Get someone moving well first before we start loading it. Otherwise, what you practice becomes permanent. And if you practice shitty motor unit recruitment patterns, that's going to become your norm. That's going to be what your body falls back on. Like every time you learn something, your brain creates these neural connections, these neural pathways. And if you're not paying attention to your quality movement when you're learning something and you're just going through the reps in a CrossFit style session and you're just banging out rep after rep for time and you're not paying attention to your technique, what muscles are firing in what order, when, etc., then, that's going to become your pattern. Every time you need to do that movement, your brain just goes boom and fires that blueprint, and then you start practicing shitty movement over and over and over again, and then you start loading that movement. And as you said, you start getting a little bit of a pain in the knee or your elbows or something. One of the joints starts talking to you. That's your check engine light coming on saying, hey, something's not quite aligned here. Something's not quite moving as well as it should be. But most people don't pay attention to it, and they go, well, I'll just work around it, blah, blah, blah. And then after 3 months, they're like, oh, now I can't squat anymore because it hurts when I squat. And then 6 months later, they're like, well, now I can't do fucking any lower body movements because it hurts all the time. And it's like, you've just created these poor patterns and you've just loaded those patterns time and time and time again. And that acute issue has now become a chronic issue.
Yeah. So you look to, the brain's controlling everything. And the brain will do anything it can do to keep you moving. Again, going back to evolution, the two most important things, this is the same for every single person on the planet. Your two most favorite things in the world is oxygen and gait. If you can't walk, you can't hunt, you can't find food. And I know, hey, cool, I can just call Uber Eats, but your body still wants to do that. Remember, bodies haven't changed, the environment's changed. So in order to keep you walking or crawling or trying to find a source of food and water, your brain will create faulty motor patterns to work around an injury. Well, like you said, check engine light. If I feel that and I keep lifting like trash and I don't address that, eventually it's going to manifest as a shoulder issue or wrist issue, or the elbow is going to go, or even the hip might go. So once you get locked in those faulty patterns, the brain is looking and talking to the muscles. Muscles are dumb. They just do what they're told. And you have what's called muscle synchronicity. So when I'm learning an exercise, the reason people are shaky and they look like shit at first is because the brain is trying to figure out, okay, what muscles do I need to fire and relax in the right order? And when you start getting into a faulty movement pattern, the brain then rewires how it's finding those muscles. And so it keeps you locked into that position. So then things just continue to deteriorate because you're consciously thinking about one movement. Your brain is thinking about doing it a different way. So you're basically fighting against your brain for control over a joint, and the brain's going to win. That you're not going to beat your brain. It's way smarter than you are, and everything that it does can be done on a level that you can't tap into. So you might as well just work with the brain and stop fighting your own physiology.
Mate, where I want to go now is kind of circle back to what you were talking about earlier with people wanting to get into the gym and lift, even though they might have had a stressful day or whatever. Now, I want to talk about the HPA axis because I'd like for you to explain why some people feel like shit until they start training again because they may have some form of dysfunction there and they need that cortisol and that adrenaline response from that, firing up that sympathetic nervous system. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, you have a few things to kind of unpack with that, right? You have some people that, and you always know who they are because they're exercise addicts. They're in the gym for 3 or 4 hours, the only time they feel normal. A lot of these people have pushed themselves to a point where their HPA doesn't work effectively. Maybe their receptors are desensitized because they're bathing in adrenaline or bathing in cortisol, and they get to the point where they're just chronically fatigued unless they do that thing. Or there could be neurotransmitter issues. You might have low levels of certain neurotransmitters that are excitatory, and you're using the gym to boost those up. Just like for me, I have ADD. I have to take a medication that basically floods me with adrenaline, noradrenaline, and dopamine because some of those things I don't make. I don't make dopamine correctly. I don't transport it correctly. My receptor doesn't work well. So when you look at like somebody who's depressed, and the doctor will give them something like a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or like a norepinephrine MOA serotonin receptor inhibitor, those things then bathe your brain in the chemicals that you're not actually able to make properly. So it keeps the neurons or the axons from pulling the neurotransmitter back into the axon bulb, and some of them will destroy the enzymes that break those neurotransmitters down. So you have a heightened level of these things for as long as the medication is working your body. For a lot of people, they're using the gym to boost those things up so they can feel better because that's basically their medication. Sometimes it's trauma. People have unresolved baggage trauma. You get guys. I was bullied when I was a kid, right? I was in the martial arts. I did judo, Japanese jiu-jitsu, and this weird hard style karate, kenpo, taekwondo mashup, right? So it's all this weird stuff. And I became quite lethal as a kid. And then I went home. My parents go, if you ever use this at school, you're going to be in deep shit when you get home. So I just let people slap me around and pick on me because I was so deathly afraid of getting in trouble when I got home. And so, my parents were we're keeping my kid out of trouble at school, but they didn't realize I was causing long-lasting trauma that led me to go into powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, steroids, and all this to put on a gorilla suit, thinking that people would leave me alone if I just got really fucking massive. And I can tell you that doesn't work. Drunk dudes, small drunk dudes love to fuck with the biggest dudes in the bar, always. And so you can have all these different issues on that. If someone has chronic fatigue, sometimes training makes them feel better. But what they really need to do is resolve the issue of why the hypothalamus or the pituitary or the adrenals aren't working correctly in the first place.
Which is a very complex topic. If someone is listening and they do go, I feel like shit most of the time until I do start training, how could they potentially have a look at what might be causing that?
So the first thing, we've got to look at the nervous system. So you've got to take the metrics, same stuff that I taught you in foundations. Look at their heart rate, look at their blood pressure, look at their HRV. If the heart rate is high and the HRV is low, or if one of them's high and low, that's not a great thing. If blood pressure is super high or super low, your body's not working in an optimal manner. We need to figure out how we get the body back to a level of under 120 over 80 blood pressure. If your blood pressure is really low, like say, under 90 over 50, we need to bring that up. If your heart rate's really high, we got to bring that down. If your HRV is really low, we got to try to bring that up. And a lot of it is, not stopping training, but then reframing what you think training's supposed to be. So if you're stressed out CEO, Fortune 500 company, and you love to go in and run sprints on the Echo bike, and you love to push the prowler, and you love to just go crazy in the gym, if you have a stress response, it's not normal, that's just going to compound and make it worse. So kind of my thing is, when you look at most guys, I assume that most men that walk in my office are going to be hypertense. They're going to have high blood pressure. They're going to have high heart rate, and they probably don't do any conditioning. They've probably gone through bulking and cutting phases, trying to change their physique. I assume that most of them are type A OCD, go, 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 go. And I assume that a lot of women, in order to change their bodies, have done Zumba and body combat and lots of running and starved themselves. And then go starving themselves and then binging. So they've been this binge and purge cycle. And so most women that come in that I see are normally hypotense. So their blood pressure is actually too low. They got postural hypotension. So when they stand up, they see spots and they get really faint. You might need two different protocols, whereas the women might need to do more lifting and the guys might need to do more conditioning. So that's my guideline for most of the clients when I get them in is men need to do more conditioning and a little bit less weight training, and then move the weight training from neural to more metabolic. Most women need to do more neural heavy lifting and a little bit less conditioning, maybe more sprint work, And then we need to also look at the diet to see if, are you eating enough sodium? Are you eating too little sodium? Are you eating enough potassium? Are you eating too little? Because that can cause a stress response as well if you can't manage your sodium potassium pump.
Man, so many things to unpack there. I don't really know where to start. So you said most women need to probably do a little bit more weightlifting, and most chicks, particularly when they're looking to lose weight, they're fucking cardio bunnies, right? And they're under eating. So that's creating a stress response. And if you're under eating, you've got 11 systems of the body, and if those systems aren't being fueled with what you're eating, the ratios of macronutrients, how much you're getting them in, when you're getting them in, etc., then your body's literally fucking running on fumes. And when you spoke about guys training, most guys are going to be more neurologically driven. So when you say the neurological training, you mean more like the strength work, the power work, the speed work. They need to do less of that and more of the kind of strength, endurance, bodybuilding style training. Is that correct?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Like, I'm actually not opposed to doing speed work if it's pure speed work, but a lot of the guys are doing, like, their whole conditioning is 60 minutes of hit intervals. If you're working on speed and power, that heightens the nervous system, but it doesn't typically tax the nervous system. What really taxes the nervous system is too much volume of metabolic work, which a lot of women do, and too much heavy eccentric loading, which is what a lot of guys do. A lot of the guys, they might come in, they're doing 5x5 protocol because that's an easy one to find online. They'll be doing a lot of bodybuilding stuff. And then, but just getting through the reps isn't enough. They want to do forced reps and drop sets. And so that they're choosing really good tools, not appropriate for their situation. We got to regress that back and say, look, when's the last time you did a push-up? Push-ups are for pussies. All right, let me see you do a push-up. Whoa, that looked horrible. Maybe we should try working on push-ups and single leg squats, split squat step-ups. Maybe we should pull-ups. Maybe we should start working on a TRX a little more and actually get everything moving. And then we'll slowly progress back into the weights. And with the women, what they're doing, what's the Les Mills thing? Body pump. They're like, I lift weights, I go to body pump. That's not lifting weights. You're just dancing around with a 2 kilo dumbbell in your hand. That I'm talking real ass weights, like what the dudes do. The dudes need to do more of the chick shit. The chicks need to do more of the dude shit. And then when they're both normalized, now they need to figure out what's most important and blend that in and stay within a context, right?
Well said, mate. I want to talk about periodization for general population. You kind of just touched on it there, and you spoke about it earlier. I want to get your thoughts on how you think periodization fits into a general population client's program.
Oh man, periodization is one of those ridiculous arguments you get in the personal training and the strength and conditioning world. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm a big believer in periodization. I mean, everything you do in the gym has got a specific adaptation. So if I'm looking for something specific, I'm going to program a specific way. And then if I don't know where I want to go and where I'm starting, you don't have a plan. You're just lifting. You get much better results if you think about it as far as going through hypertrophy phase, strength endurance phase, max strength phase. You've got all these different phases, linking them up into a chronological order that makes sense in order to, this phase is going to potentiate this phase, which potentiates this phase and this phase. And by the time you get to the last phase, now we hit a crescendo of peaking something, whether that's muscle mass or a deadlift or a 5K, whatever. If you're not using periodization as a trainer, you're fucking lazy. You need to get more education and periodize your client shit because you have no plan. You're just basically throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And we get paid a lot of money. You're not getting paid to watch people exercise and be their best buddy and count the reps and tempo. You're getting paid to get results. And to get world-class results, you need a fucking plan. Can you imagine somebody coming to you and saying, in 4 years, I'm going to be in the Olympics? And you go, okay, cool. We'll just do what's open. We'll do some leg press, and then the hack squat's open. We'll go do the hack squat. You'd never see that happening in an Olympic Training Center. Why are we getting paid so much and we're not giving our clients the level of care that you would use with a professional athlete? Okay, because they need it the most. So we want to look through what is the big rocks and little rocks. What do we take care of first? First thing for most people is structural balance stuff. They need to learn how to, if you're going to want to operate on 2 hands and 2 feet, you need to work on one at a time. Get the balance, get control, get stable, get flexibility and mobility. Strength is easy. If your body is mechanically really good and sound, you got a stable spine. Building strength is probably the easiest part of this whole thing. Do the exercise, rest for 5 days, go back, add a little bit of weight, do the exercise, go home, rest for 5 days, go back, add a little bit more weight. It's not fucking rocket science. Now, there's ways you can increase strength using periodization, but and you can make things a lot faster. But even with Gym Pop, I absolutely use periodization. Everything we do is planned. We plan most of our clients' training 6 to 12 months out. I build a skeleton of what I'm going to do. I may not use that phase, but it's there. So everything's already planned out 12 months in advance. If we hit a hiccup, that's cool. I'm just going to move the timeline and add a phase in here to take care of that hiccup, and then I'm going to get back on the plan.
Yeah, I love that, man. Periodization is a plan. It's an end state that you're working towards, and then you've got all of those steps that you're putting in place from, as you said earlier, A to Z. All right, cool. To get to Z, I need to go from A to B first. That means I need structural integrity. That means I need good movement function. That means I need, my joints aligned and moving correctly and stable and, strong at all ranges, at multiple joint angles. Then I start loading that. Then I start building strength, power, speed, etc. Now, that's regarding training. Let's talk about periodization regarding nutrition. How do you fit that into the mold as well?
Okay, so the first thing I look at, I look at the continuum. Now, when you look at the macronutrients, when you look into nutritional studies, it's pretty clear. It doesn't matter what diet you do, as long as the protein is high enough and the calories are matched, high carb, low carb, doesn't really matter. But that doesn't mean that one isn't better at a certain time than others. So if somebody's more insulin resistant, a lower carb diet is going to work fantastic. If they're insulin sensitive, higher carbohydrate is going to work really, really well. So I've got this continuum with a ketogenic diet on one side and then a carbohydrate diet on the other. So you got it and everything in between, like standard keto, athletic keto, which is something that I created. You got cyclical, targeted, modified low carb diet, isocaloric diet. You've got zone, then you start moving into 50, 60, 70% carbs. Your client's going to fit somewhere on there right now. And as they lose weight or as they build muscle, they're going to be shifting around that continuum. Now, most of the people that we deal with is going to be fat loss, right? That's most of the personal training. And people, they feel bad about themselves. They can't fit in the clothes they fit in their 20s. They want to fit in that stuff. They want to look good. They want to be desirable for their husband, or they got a divorce and want to, go get some ass, whatever. But most of them wanted body recomp. That's the majority of what we do. So if I have someone who is really overweight, so let's say somebody is, I shouldn't say overweight. I'll say something you're not supposed to say, overly fat. Can't say that these days, right? We'll say they have they have excessive stored energy on their body that we need to get rid of, okay? So the more stored energy you have on your body, I can't say fat cells, so I'll say the more stored energy in your adipocytes, be clinically correct, the chances are the more inflamed you're going to be, because adipocytes secrete inflammatory chemicals, so the more you have, the more inflammation. So carbohydrates tend to be the macronutrient that has the most effect on how you move energy around the body. So if you can't manage your carbohydrates well, it's going to affect fat burning as also. So what I'll typically do is I put almost everybody in a lower carb diet. That doesn't mean keto. That doesn't mean, 2 licks of a dried prune, as Charles used to say. That means, whatever your activity is, we're going to set your protein, set your fat, and then we're going to fill in the gap with carbohydrates. If you have a shit ton of exercise you're doing, that might be a lot of carbs, and that might be low carb for you, but really high carb for someone else. So everyone's an N of one. It's all individual. Most of the people I have at our gym at the Institute of Physical Culture here in Brisbane, most of them are 30 to 50% body fat. First thing I do is I put them on a very low carb diet. And I'm just going to say it. I usually put people on a carnivore-ish style diet initially, because they don't know how food works. They don't know how to track it. They don't eat enough protein. So I say, okay, all you're going to eat is animal protein. If you're a vegan, you're going to have a lot of shakes and a lot of low carbohydrate vegan type foods. When you start losing weight, we're going to slowly add more carbs in. We're going to slowly add more exercise to your tolerance. And then we slide them up that scale until we find for them what's a good amount of carbs. Is it 25%, 40%, wherever that is? And then that'll fluctuate depending on how much activity they're doing. I tell them the more activity you do, the more yummy carbs you get. So if you train hard and you do a lot of training, once they're ready for it, we're going to give them a lot more carbohydrates.
So you're kind of already building in like a somewhat of an elimination diet. You're removing all of those potential foods that might be creating intolerances. Get them on a fairly restrictive diet where it's very fucking simple. Eat meats, and then progressively start adding things in. Yeah, I love that, man. That brings up another point for me. Let's discuss the difference between eating and training for health compared to eating and training for performance. What's the difference there, and how would you talk to someone who does want to come in and train for performance but doesn't have their health markers in line yet?
Okay, and just so that listeners are clear, yeah, I'll put people on a carnivore style diet, or I'll put them on carnivore and non-starchy veg. So, and what you said earlier, that's exactly it. Simple. I need to create a solution that is simple. The more simple it is and the less shit you got to manage, the more compliant and easier it is for your client. So if I'm teaching somebody to weigh and measure and track food, it's way easier to cut a bunch of foods out and just focus on one macro and as much green veg as you can put in your mouth. So we'll tell people, eat this many grams of some type of something that had eyeballs and breathed. And you do that like 4 times a day. And then you can have 2 fists of veggies or more. If veggies, to me, if you're eating something like green beans, carrots, asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, eggplant, any of that shit, eat as much as you want. It's not going to keep you from losing fat. Now, if you eat a lot of it and you're not used to it, you may shit a turd sideways and it may rip your butthole, but that's okay. That's all right. Now, going to performance versus health. Okay. So with the health stuff, the way I train and the way I have my coaches train in our gym and online is for health, we prioritize movement over muscles. Okay. So our thing is we want people to get moving. We want them mobile, flexible, stable, have lots of control over their joints. And then bodybuilding is kind of a secondary thing. If you get really mobile and looking good and you're getting stronger and you're getting better at your movements, you're going to build the body that you want. It's going to have good symmetry. Nothing's going to be overdone because the body tends to keep all the muscles kind of in line with each other. And you don't end up, having a massive chest and no arms, or you might, having like all quads and no hamstrings. But the goal is to get them moving and feeling better and not having a lot of restrictions in their movement. We don't do a lot of bodybuilder type stuff. We do single joint stuff if it makes sense. So if it's for a rehabby type thing, or it's going to make something like a chin up easier, then we'll throw in, bicep curls and all that type of stuff. For the eating, we usually think lower carb, get to the goal weight you want to be. As we're bringing the carbs up, let's get you stabilized, and let's focus on trying to eat as much healthy, clean food. And that's another thing I hate when people go, there's no such thing as a clean for dirty food. Yeah, there is. You're going to tell me that chicken and broccoli is versus a fucking donut, that the donut's not dirty? Okay, if we're going to say that there's no such thing as clean and dirty food, okay, let's reframe it a different way. There's beneficial foods and less beneficial foods, right? So we try to get them to eat more beneficial foods and to limit the not as beneficial foods to treats every once in a while, a birthday, Saturday night movie. That not every day ending in Y is not a special day for special treats. So we try to get our Gen Pop people to do that. But when it comes to performance, it's a whole nother animal, because now everything that we do has to be specific for the sport. If they come in and they've got a host of injuries, we have to take care of those injuries, because once we start loading those with heavy weights or long runs, it's just going to get faultier and faultier. And then they end up on my treatment table and I have to do a heap shit of treatment. So what we do is we try to get all the stuff in line. If they have a specific posture for their sport, for example, if I have, something you would know very well. If I have a TIE fighter or a boxer coming in, they're going to be in this posture. This is where they live. If they're walking in like that and they're in pain, the goal isn't to get them like this, because number one, you're not going to be able to do that because they're always here. The goal is to get them functional in this position, because if you alter that position, their fighting goes to shit. It's like taking a golfer and fucking up his golf swing and he never gets it back. Same thing with what I do is jujitsu. We're all like that too. We live in this position here. If I have a jujitsu guy that's a brown belt and he competes, I'm not trying to remove that faulty posture, because that posture is not faulty for his sport. So what we do is we try to eliminate the pain, get the structure strong in that position. Now, when you look at athletes, most of them, if they've been training a long time, though, what would be considered those faulty postures are actually quite strong and rigid. And they usually get an injury for something else because they've slowly adapted their body into that. So they do have structural rigidity in a skeletal structure that usually you wouldn't. If I see that in a gen pop, we have to eliminate that. If I have somebody that comes in and got excessive kyphosis, forward head posture, internal rotation, I'm going to try to correct that as much as can be done, because they don't have a sport that they need that position for. Once we get the athletes out of pain, now we say, okay, what needs to come first, strength or speed or distance or speed? And so depending on if we're working with a ultra marathoner versus, a boxer or something like that. So then we start using metrics. We look at like velocity-based training. How is your 1 rep max in certain lifts compared to your med ball slams or maybe your bar speed on a squat? And then we start designing programs for that. And then to match the nutrition up, every sport's got a different nutritional profile. One of my vegan ultra marathon runners, like, I've got to write a diet that fits in, that's vegan, but supplies enough protein and then also supplies enough carbohydrates to do those long runs. And I have to also get her to do a body recomp, which we've done quite nicely. Now, she's eating, her dieting is like 3,000 calories. People go, that's a diet? Well, yeah, she's doing like 100K every week. So that's, her volume's high enough that she needs that much. So her low carb might be 300. And for a gen popper, their low carb might be 75. So that's the main differences. And then through the different sports, like protein allotments are a bit different. The endurance athletes, we try to get them to about 2.2 grams per kilogram. A lot of research says that's a little bit more than they need, but I would rather remove all doubt and make sure we're absolutely hitting that. And rather than give them 1.6 and think, well, find out 10 years later, 2.2 is actually where we need to be. If I've got powerlifters, strongman, fighters, we try to get them a little higher, try to get them up to 2.5, 2.6, and then we fill in the rest with carbs. The problem with fighters is convincing them that they need to eat more. You can't train 8 hours a day and eat fucking 1,800 calories. That's been the biggest thing, is trying to get these guys to understand, like, a fucking cup of yogurt before your bed isn't enough protein. You need to be eating a lot more food, and your injuries would go away. A lot of them would go away if you just feed the body.
Mate, that was an amazing passage. That is literally like the art being applied to the science. That was an incredible passage, man. Thank you. I need to start winding up, mate, because I do have another interview, and I'm obviously wary of your time. But just to wind up the episode, the name of this podcast is Live, Train, Perform, which stands for Live Life to the Fullest, Train to Your Potential, and Perform at Your Best. What does that mantra mean to you?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, man. I love these little tidbits on the podcast when they just throw you a boomerang and you're like, oh, shit. So, look, living life. Let's say it again. Living life to the potential. Say it one more time for me.
Live life to the fullest.
Life to the fullest.
Live life to the fullest.
Yep, got it.
Train to your potential.
Your potential.
Perform at your best.
Perform at your best. Oh, man, that could be so many things. I love that, though. I do love that. I think one of the things that people don't do anymore is they don't follow their passions. And I think if you want to live life to the fullest, you need to be working not on yourself instead of working on other people. And one of the things that I see with a lot of people these days is I'm massively against altruism. You should never set yourself on fire to save someone else. Like, the philanthropy and generosity is different than altruism, right? So we need to be able to take care of ourselves first. And for that, it's like, okay, what makes me happy? For me, I need a lot of alone time. Like, you've seen me get up and go like a maniac lecturing. And looks like I'm an extrovert and I'm doing all this stuff, and I have a blast when I'm lecturing. That's why I will never only do online. I'll always do in-person stuff too, because I enjoy it so much, but I'm fucking wiped after it. Like, I'm a massive introvert. I have a lot of hobbies and passions that I do. And my wife knows that, when we're at the house, I'm going to have just alone time, or nobody bothers me, even my own wife. And so I think that a lot of people need to be more true with themselves about what they need to be a good human, what they need for their mental health, and what they need for their physical health. And sometimes that's having hard discussions with your partner or your friends, and learning that no is a single statement. There's no, this is why. No. So be steadfast to tell people no when you don't want to do something, or when it's going to be detrimental to your own schedule or your own health or whatever. And then find stuff that you're passionate about. Find a sport you're passionate about. People don't do enough sports stuff. You could play, tag footy on the weekends, or jujitsu, or you could get in a kickboxing class, or you can go to a weightlifting competition. Find something to train for, because the best results are people who have an actual thing, whether it's a photo shoot or a 10K or something. Find a reason to fucking live, and stop pursuing hedonistic things. Stop pursuing getting drunk on the weekend, chronic masturbation, doing blow up a hooker's ass, whatever. Like, channel all that energy into something that's, instead of hedonism, more eudanism, and gives yourself a life purpose. And that's where you look at things that you're passionate about and going full Monty into that. How's that?
Fucking awesome answer, bro. You nailed that. You nailed that, mate. Where can people find you if they want to, if they're interested in doing the foundations course? You've also got your program design course as well. If people want to follow your stuff, they want to get involved, learn from you, where can they find your content?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, musclenurse.net. It lays out all the programs, and we've got a few out right now. We just released a nutrition one it's 8 modules. I think it's about 7 or 8 hours long. And it goes through, what is a protein and what is a carb and what is a fat? Chemically, what do they do in your body? Why are they important? And then ranges that you need to think about. We go into things like relative energy deficiency and low energy availability, why you don't want to diet too hard for too long, and how to periodize that, and how many calories do you actually need, how to calculate that out, how to figure out your fat-free mass just using circumference measures, how to write a diet for that. And then it goes in some things like cultural and religious and belief system things. And we wrote it for trainers, but I've got a lot of trainers that have their Gen Pop clients actually buy it, because I explain a lot of things in there that make it easier for them, because now they don't have to explain it. Like, oh, just go watch Luke, it's in the video. But we go over things like, if you have a client that's Muslim, you really need to know, like, what they can and can't eat, because you don't want to offend them as a client, because that's bad for business. And you don't want to be writing things that they can't actually do. If you're training a guy that's Jewish and Indian, if you're training somebody from fucking Eskimo, you need to know what they eat. You need to know how their culture and their religious preferences revolve around food, whether it's a family thing like Italians and Indians. That you got to know this stuff, or you're not really giving the level of service that you should. We go into, so that is such a cheap course. It's like $4.97 Australian. So it's like you can almost pay for it with Monopoly money, because the Australian dollar sucks. And it's all online. You do it online. There's a quiz after every section, and then you get a certificate of completion. We've got the foundations we can't do right now because COVID. That's the live one, but I'm slowly taking all the modules and I'm trying to videotape them and basically revamp and refresh it and make it totally new, and put way more stuff in it than we've ever done in a live class. Because in a live class, I've only got 3 8 to 10 hour days to get the material across. Now I don't have a time limit. I can just write it for however long I want the modules to be. So we'll have the gut health, the stress stuff. We'll have the carbohydrates, proteins, all that stuff, and go wacky deep into the biochemistry. And so I'm going to be putting that out soon. The program design is a massive course. You pay once, you go through it as many times as you want. You basically, it's like becoming a Crip or a Blood. You're in it for life, and if you try to leave, I'm gonna kill you. That type of shit. But actually, if you're a turd, if you come in, you're a turd, I'm gonna kick you out anyways. But you go through that, and that lays out everything you need to know about assessments, body reading, how to figure out where to put somebody in a squat based on the orthopedic profile, periodization, sets, reps, time and attention, all that stuff, stress response with that as well. Like it goes into everything you would need as a beginning trainer or even an advanced trainer. A lot of shit you would never have been taught in your Cert 3, 4, and stuff you might not have thought about it. And the feedback I've gotten is like you said, hey, I went to foundations and, I was already using some of this stuff and then I found other stuff to layer in. And I hear that quite often. And then usually I hear this, that course actually provided the glue that I needed to pull all the shit I was doing. So it made sense of why I was doing it and how to systemize it. Because all of our courses, we try to do it in a way that makes you a better critical thinker so that you think about why and what you're doing instead of just giving people stuff just to give it to them because somebody told you that that's the way you do it. So yeah, that's basically most of the stuff we have. That's musclenerds.net, and then Instagram's musclenerds health, musclenerds_health. If you want memes, then Luke Leaman, Leaman. If you like memes, especially really bad, unpolitically correct shit, that's what my Instagram is for. Don't contact me on that for me. Contact Muscle Nerds because all I do on there is post like horrible fucking political memes and like really bad shit that I'm going to get in trouble for someday.
Brilliant, mate. I'm going to have all of those links in the show notes, particularly your personal page, so people can go and get those good memes. But mate, I really want to say thank you for your time, but thank you for the content that you're putting out, and for the Muscle Nerds, I guess, crew that you're creating, the what would you call it? The people that follow you, man. Like you've got such a amazing array of trainers, people that buy into your program, buy into what you guys are doing, believe in what you guys are doing, and I'm proud to be a part of that crew. And I met some amazing people. I've had Will Foden on the podcast a number of times, and I think do you know Lizzie Ridey as well? Mm-hmm. So those guys have been part of the podcast many times. So I just want to thank you personally, mate, for your time and for what you guys are doing. It's definitely made a massive impact on my career and my coaching and training philosophy. So thank you very much, brother. We have to do this again, man. We literally just touch the surface.
Yeah, man. I just want to say I really appreciate you having me on. I love getting on and chatting this stuff. And so, so thank you. And it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in forever. We chat from time to time, but it's just probably not enough. So it's really good to see you and looking so fucking tan. Look at you. Look at me. Man.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it, mate. Let's do this again soon. I've got to run, bro.
All right. We'll see you.
Peace, mate. And there we have it. Great conversation with my man, Luke Leaman of Muscle Nerds Health. If you enjoy this conversation, you think your friends and family can benefit from the message, please make sure you pass it off to them. Any 5-star ratings and reviews are much appreciated. Much love, guys. Peace.